Excellent segue into this panel discussion. As I mentioned, Carlie is going to be walking us through this panel. I want to say a brief comment about Carlie, who I've known for quite some time and always enjoyed working with. Carlie is the Director of Communications and Engagement Strategy for the Schmidt Ocean Institute, and also the co-chair of the UN Ocean Decade Communications Advisory Group. Prior to joining the Schmidt Ocean Institute, Dr. Wiener held posts as communications manager for Center for Ocean Science Education Excellence, Island Earth, and as research and outreach specialist for the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Research Partnership at the University of Hawaii. She's also hosted the monthly marine science radio show, All Things Marine, for 6 years during that time. Excuse me. So if you can, clearly Carlie has a wealth of experience and knowledge in this area and is seen as a leader in our community and internationally. So please welcome me in joining Carlie and the panelists to the stage.
Thank you, Alan. Those are very kind words, and it's a pleasure to be here in person today and looking forward to hearing from everyone in the audience, both here present and virtually. I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists today, but before I introduce them to tell their story, I wanted to start to talk a little bit more about the thread that brings everyone together on this public engagement and impact panel. Now, I had some opening remarks prepared, but I actually am going to throw them out the window because the first panel did such a great job of teeing up the conversation here that I don't think they're necessary. I did want to start by talking a little bit, though, about story, and story as being a great unifier in what we do here and how we bring inclusion to ocean science and exploration community. If you look here at the first slide, hopefully I can get that. Perfect, thank you. If you look here at the first slide, this is a great example of how imagery and story can shift perception. Story is a depiction of a journey or a telling of an event. It allows the listener to experience something in transforming information, experience, or point of view. For example, when you look at this map here, the ocean becomes present as the first thing you see instead of the continents, which we typically see when looking at a map. We see the ocean as one, as a great unifier, and that is exactly what story and imagery can do. Story allows us to dream and nourish our ambitions. It takes something that we can grow, something even bigger that we never thought imaginable. And that is something that we like to do at Schmidt Ocean Institute. We are all storytellers, and these stories engage the public in entertaining, engaging, inspiring, and intriguing. An example of this is the discovery of or viewing of a rare glass octopus that we saw last year in the Pacific with our underwater robot, Sebastian. The imagery that we were able to obtain and the story of the expedition that we shared allowed us to intrigue the world and bring in different stories and different audiences with the work that we were doing. But the question at hand now as we turn to the future is, how do we use story as a way of engaging new audiences? And how do we do this with creativity and collaboration? And the panelists that I have here today with me are going to share examples of how exactly that is done. They are accomplished storytellers who demonstrate exactly how to do this. And so I'd like to call our first panelist up here to the podium, Naiʻa Lewis, a talented artist from Hawaii with one foot in ocean conservation and the other in making cultural connections. Naiʻa.
Aloha mai kākou. As Carlie said, my name is Naiʻa. Born and raised in Hawaii, and so from my kupuna and my ancestors to the indigenous people of this land, I'd like to say mahalo, as well as to the conveners and all of my colleagues that I had met at Papahana Mokuakea at my time in NOAA, Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. It's kind of been like old home week here, so this is awesome. And the interesting part is I'm here today as an independent artist. This first image that you're looking at is called Kalehuawehe. And it depicts a wave which is, basically become mythical at this point. You don't see it anymore. The stories of this wave are that it would start a mile out and it would roll in to shore in Waikiki. And one of the most famous, iconic surfers, Duke Kahanamoku, is said to have ridden this wave. But again, you don't see this wave anymore. And to me, it really represents the ocean, I guess, of my father's childhood. And so one of the questions our group has been asking ourselves is, what is this first experience that you have with the ocean? And for me, it's not a discrete moment. It's like an integrated whole into my childhood. But as I've been thinking about it, it's really not my own sense of the ocean or my own story of the ocean. It's really the story of my father and the ocean that he experienced as a child and the stories that he would tell me. And so for me, the power of art, versus like art making versus a photograph or video, which those are wonderful, is that it allows, right, an expansion of one's imagination. And this really is a story of the ocean that's very deeply personal to me, but it's actually not mine. It's not something that I experienced personally, but it was really diffuse in my world throughout my entire childhood in terms of how my father would speak about the ocean and the abundance and its tie to land. So in Hawaii, we say aina, which many people think is land, but ai is food. And so aina is really anything that feeds or sustains you. So aina is also ocean, right? It's a place that feeds one spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Can I go back? Yes, okay. This next image, so I make art using many different media, but I'm here today sharing with you guys what I call mosaic murals. And so it really starts with a masterpiece of paper. Some are larger than others. This one is actually very small. The tiles were 3 inches square. And the final image is a he'e, or an octopus. Is in Hawaii, we call them a he'e. And the title to this piece is Mana Kia'i. And mana is like life force or power, and kia'i is the guardian. And he'e are also a body form or a kinolau of Kanaloa, who is the god of the ocean. And so this particular mural was actually done with a group. So sometimes I do these solo, which was the previous image. But I think the power of art making is when you can be collaborative and create a story, not only of the mural itself, but the story between people as they are participating. And so this one, I heard a colleague of mine, his name mentioned earlier, Nathan Bennett. He had organized a workshop around calling for a code of conduct to be created for large-scale marine protected areas. And so in this workshop with about 20 or so practitioners, scientists, each one of them got one of the paper tiles that you see there in my hand, and they were asked to sign the back. And as they signed it, what I basically put forth to them was, as you sign this, it's basically you signing a contract that what you share here today in terms of how to engage with community, an ethical code of conduct, if you will, you're really signing a contract that you live out these values and principles that you are speaking to today to help inform this paper. And so as you can see, the top, it goes from simply the outline to having it be cut up to the next phase, which was everybody's contribution. And I guess I will add, they don't know what the final image is when they get their tile. They just have a piece with various lines on it. And then in the end, I come through and merge everybody's contribution. And so this piece was actually made in conjunction to be a visual narrative, right? Or a visual story of the actual paper itself. And so once again, I think art making in the sense of fine art or creative art versus photographs or video are a really unique way to help people expand their imagination about the ocean space. This one here was done in conjunction with an exhibition, a 3-day cultural pop-up with the Smithsonian. This particular exhibition was called Ai Kai. And so here you can see elements of the ocean, but the red line running through is really like the bloodline, right? Or the blood as the currents and as it surges through your body. And so for me, the symbolism here was the ocean really is that blood, right? The carrier of oxygen towards, our shared existence on the planet. You have other cultural elements like Papahana Moku, the woman on the bottom, and Wakea, or Sky Father, on the top. And so the middle line is really Aikai, which is the ocean merging with the land. And it is that space of two divergent or forces, right? A tension of forces, but it is that tension that creates life. And so I would also say it is that tension between diverse ideas, right? That art making and storytelling using a variety of media can also help us create new lexicons and shared languages that move beyond, right? Just research papers. And the final one that I'll share here with you guys, it may not actually seem like the ocean is a discrete part of this particular mural. This one was done with about 20 young, well, anywhere between probably 18 and 50 Indigenous women who were participating in a nonprofit program by Elima McFarlane. And it was done to highlight the high rates of murdered and missing Indigenous women. And it was really powerful in terms of the stories that these girls and women wrote on the back in terms of their experience. But for me, the ocean appears in almost all of my murals in some way. And so even though they didn't realize, right, that the ocean was incorporated, it's really interesting how below that they did incorporate colors of blue in terms of almost like her bloodstream being the ocean. And in her hair, you see the moon phases, and the moon controls the tide. And it ultimately really is that source of life from which we all spring. And tying back to the previous mural, Papahana Moku was that female goddess of the earth and procreation. So again, I think art and storytelling through media, right, of unique original media is definitely one way to allow people to envision their own image of the ocean rather than images that we choose to present to them. So I really appreciate being here today. Mahalo.
Thank you for sharing your beautiful work. I'd like to call upon Adam Idelson next, who engages children of all ages as a writer and producer for Octonauts for Silvergate Media. Thank you, Adam.
So Octonauts is a TV show, but it started out as a series of books by two artists who call themselves Miomi. As you can see from some of these images, they are very inspired by the ocean and its creatures, but there wasn't a lot of story there. And so when we optioned the books, our challenge was how do we expand this sort of universe they've created visually into a compelling and engaging show for kids and families. So our genius head writer, Stephanie Simpson, was doing some research at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and she was standing online at the manta ray touch tank, and she heard a little girl say to her mommy, looking at a manta ray, "Mommy, what planet is that from?" So that was kind of our aha moment. We realized our show was going to be Star Trek meets Jacques Cousteau for little kids. But the strange new worlds that our heroes explore are not outer space, but the uncharted oceans, and the alien weird creatures they meet are actual sea creatures. All these designed by Miomi, by the way, and then translated into CGI. We tend to focus on, especially at the beginning, on the kind of the more extreme creatures, the biggest, the scariest, the vampire squid, the fastest, and even microscopic creatures. We have a whole fleet of vehicles in the show, very cool, all inspired by ocean creatures. Oops, gotta go back. So I'm gonna show you a clip. This is kind of an example of how we do the show. The Octonauts are cleaning up a garbage patch. Plastic and trash is hurting animals. We always do it through the lens of the creatures. How's it affecting the creatures? So they have just rescued some pelicans, and now the pelicans are helping them. So as you can see, it's an action-packed show. We don't stop to teach kids facts about the ocean, but we do teach kids facts about the ocean. And we kind of condense them to like 3 or 4 what we call octo facts. And we recap it at the end of every show in what we call the creature report. It's a song with rhyming couplets, not easy to write, but hopefully fun to listen to. So we've been at this now for 12 years. I can't believe it myself. We've kind of slowly taken over the world, including China, where we're very popular. We've made lots of great partnerships, toys, and we have a roller coaster based on those aquatic vehicles in England. How cool is that? And then, of course, lots of great partnerships over the years with organizations like NOAA. We helped them with a podcast that they started sometime before the pandemic, and live events and virtual events. Also Sea Life Aquariums worldwide. And this is one of my favorite things we do with World Ocean Day. We created a printable coloring page where the kid, it's a contract like you were saying before, where a kid not only colors it in, but promises to do something good for the ocean, like clean a beach. So we are always looking for new partners, and we're always looking for new stories. And that's it. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much. I tried really hard to restrain myself from singing Creature Report.
Sorry if you're all singing that later.
We have more panelists that are working with and engaging our youth. Jill Zande brings underwater robotic technology to hands-on learning as the executive director of the MATE ROV program. Jill, please feel free to come up.
Perfect. Thank you, Carlie. And I want to thank everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And those are hard acts to follow. And I want to thank you for bringing back memories of my daughter is somewhat aged out of Octonauts at this point, but thank you for bringing back wonderful memories. You know, when we had our pre-panel meetings and we talked about using images and visuals to tell our ocean story, I had this vision of creating this marvelous video with all sorts of wonderful videos and montages. And then as the clock was ticking and the deadline approaching, I went back to the resources and the skill sets that I had available, which was PowerPoint and my obligatory title slide that was up here and just disappeared. So anyway, we'll move on with this. I also shared just wonderful artistic talent here. I'm really honored to be part of this panel. And I shared with them that the best they were going to get out of me was stick figure, right? That was all the artistic talent I was going to be able to bring to this. However, actually, I went through some old photos and I pulled out this one, fashion icon that I was with the pinstripe pants, and look at the decor, wood paneling, a really busy patriotic couch. You can probably date that photo and date me, but there you have it. There I am. I grew up in Bradford, Pennsylvania, which is a small town in northwestern Pennsylvania, more famous for Zippo lighters and case knives. I see someone nodding. Zippo lighters, you know it, case knives, Kendall oil, and deer hunting. We had the first day of deer hunting season off from school. Then famous for those things rather than producing ocean science and technology professionals. But behind my house, in the borough of Lewis Run, how many of you know boroughs, right? Small towns. Those of you who grew up in certain areas of the country know what I mean when I say borough. The borough of Lewis Run. Behind my house, there was a creek, and we called it creek, right? Not creek. Don't ask me how to spell it. It was a creek. And those of you who grew up, yeah, there you go, Rick, creeks. In my backyard, you can kind of see it. So the red dot in the center is my house I grew up in. And just to the right of that, you can see the creek. And so my first water experience was with the unsalted variety, if you will. I spent countless summers with neighborhood friends exploring the creek, wading through the shallows, damming parts of it to make swimming holes, and occasionally fishing for rainbow or brown trout. But probably the most memorable and fun and exciting time for me and my friends in the creek was turning over rocks to look for crayfish. Yeah, see, you get it, crayfish, right? We would build rock forts and castles and arenas, and we would put the two crayfish with the largest pinchers in there to battle it out, right? Yeah, we did. But that's how I learned that the pinchers grow back, right? So that was my experience there. The first time that I touched the salty variety of water, rather it touched me. Via a big splash from a Black and white member of what we like to call the charismatic megafauna. Yes, that was Shamu. Family vacations took me to SeaWorld in Sandusky, Ohio, and Marine Land and Game Farm in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I cringe when I talk about these places and audiences like these, but really it was places like that that inspired me and really sparked my interest and inspired me to pursue a degree and a career science or a career in marine science. And you can ask any of my childhood friends or neighbors, and they would say, oh, Jill always knew she wanted to be a marine biologist. And I did. Now, I like to think that places like this have evolved into places like this, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, while they don't have any charismatic megafauna on display. That is not unless you walk out of the aquarium onto the observation deck and happen to see a humpback whale or a pod of dolphins in the bay there. They do have wonderful displays like this jellyfish display, the sea nettles display. And I'll tell you, been there hundreds of times, but I can still go to the aquarium and sit there mesmerized. And you can too. They have a live cam that will allow you to tune in and view the sea nettles. Wonderful calming music. It's really a treat. So fast forward several years, and I followed in the footsteps of my two older sisters and went to the great ocean science, technology, and engineering school of Penn State University. Hey, they had a marine science minor. I think they still do. The pivotal moment for me came during my senior year and the arrival of a new professor. Dr. Chuck Fisher came fresh out of his postdoc at University of California, Santa Barbara, and he started to build his lab. He needed to build his lab. So I spent my senior year at Penn State slicing up Riftia pachyptala and various species of Bathymodiolus mussels and imaging them with scanning and transmission electron microscopy. And so I guess that was my artistic, right? I was in the dark room. So I have a little bit of artistry in there. It was just fantastic. And those of you, I think many of you know Chuck Fisher, but he studies physiological ecology of microbes, symbiotic relationships between microbes and their hosts at hydrothermal vents and hydrocarbon seeps. I should have mentioned that, but probably from the images you could tell. So after I graduated, I went to pursue my master's at Louisiana State University. I worked with Dr. Robert Carney on hydrocarbon seeps in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's where I had my first, I went on my first research cruise and had my first dive. I went on a research cruise on the Sword Johnson and had an opportunity to dive in the Johnson Sea Link submersibles. I'm sure many of you in this room have had experience with the Johnson Sea Link submersibles. Just amazing. My first dive and many others that followed were in the rear chamber. So I had that portal size view. But one opportunity, Chuck Fisher was out on a cruise and he let me take his front seat in the sphere, in the big sphere in the front. And I'm sure those of you who have been in that sphere just know what an impactful, what a marvelous view. And so as we dove down, Don Liberatore was my sub pilot. He's just such a dear and still a colleague, longtime colleague. Hit the bottom, and as clusters of tube worms and mussels came into view, that was it for me. I was hooked. And so I had the opportunity to go on research cruises and with Woods Hole vessels, and had an opportunity to dive once in the Alvin, the old Alvin, not the 6,500 meter Alvin. But I really took every opportunity I could to go out to sea and participate in research cruises, even if it meant slicing out the hearts and brains of deep sea Sebastolobus species of fish for a professor who was looking at the physiological adaptations of these creatures to high pressure and low temperature. So just, and it's fairly interesting going back to my daughter, when I pulled that picture out on the far right, she who is really no interest in the ocean world at this point, except for being associated with her mom and what I do. She asked if she could take the picture and put it up on her wall in her bedroom. So I'm not sure. I was somewhat encouraged by that, but I feel like it's going to end up in some like family movie or some birthday roast. Anyway, so at some point, I appreciated research but I did come to realize eventually that the traditional academic research pathway wasn't the right fit for me. And I was ready for a career change. And fortunately, my former major professor at LSU, Bob Carney, knew that too. And he knew I was looking for other opportunities. And so in late 1997, he called me up. He had just come back from Monterey, California, where he was at a forum that brought together thought leaders in ocean science, technology, engineering, policy, and education. And they were working on the vision for what would become the Marine Advanced Technology Education Center, or the MATE Center, which was funded by the National Science Foundation, the Advanced Technological Program at NSF. And that really focuses on community colleges and the role that they play in workforce development, and really major hands-on piece there. So long story short, I applied for a position and moved out to Monterey, and just about 2 years, less than 2 years after I started with the MATE Center, we got a call from the Marine Technology Society, the ROV committee of the Marine Technology Society, Drew Michelle and Chuck Richards, for those of you who might know those names. They were looking for help. They wanted to work with us to develop a program that helped students to develop the skills that were needed in their industry. And at the time, we were talking about the offshore oil and gas industry, and primarily contractors to the offshore oil and gas industry. So I jumped at the opportunity, and it's hard to believe that this program that was really started as a workforce development program for the offshore oil and gas industry has evolved into a program that excites, inspires, educates, and empowers students to learn about, to understand, to care about ocean issues, and to innovate solutions to the problems that we all face. And so again, it's really hard to believe it's come a long way. And if you look at the slide, the bottom of the slide, our competition theme and our scenarios change every year. Another artistic piece is how to translate a real world scenario right into something that goes on the bottom of a swimming pool. I'm pretty adept at that. The bottom of the slide here, it showcases this year's competition theme, UN Decade of the Ocean. We are an endorsed UN Decade of the Ocean activity. Thanks a lot to Carlie and the team at Schmidt Ocean Institute for helping us with that. And MATE inspires ESG. I'm sure many of you have heard that term, ESG, environmental, social governance. There are factors that more and more corporations and financial markets are taking into consideration when they make business decisions, financial decisions, and we're going to hear more and more about ESG as we move forward with the new blue economy. So I'll stop with what started as this passion for crayfish battles in my backyard has turned into this passion for building this diverse global community of learners who are collaborating, they're cooperating, they're innovating, and they're helping to create solutions and really do good for good. And hopefully 10 years from now at the forum, 10 years from now, some of them will be here telling their own ocean story. So thank you. Thanks, Carlie.
Thank you, Jill. Our last panelist to share an example today is John Steele. He has always shared the best stories as president and publisher of Nautilus magazine and Nautilus Think. He is now tackling deep sea through the new Ocean Insert, which you all should have picked up today at registration. And if you haven't, please make sure you go and do so, as well as engaging in a partnership with the UN Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. John.
So Nautilus is a literary science magazine with the aim of connecting science to people's everyday lives. And we do that through story, because we always say, if you want to engage somebody, just tell them a good story. And we're trying to bring the same kind of work to Nautilus Ocean, which is our ocean focused magazine within a magazine. And it's going extraordinarily well. I mean, we have a relationship with Schmidt, the Bertarelli Foundation, UNESCO, and it's really just taking off incredibly. But I was telling you a story about, I was raised in Idaho, so my idea of the ocean was Jacques Cousteau and National Geographic. And it finally, that magic kind of came to me one time when I was in Sharm el-Sheikh off the Red Sea doing a story for NBC News some 40 years ago. And I thought I'd go out snorkeling. So I walked out on the beach and out of the water, stuck my head in the water, and I was amazed. There were just fish and sea life everywhere. And I'd never seen anything like it before. I mean, it was an incredible magic moment for me. And all of a sudden, Jacques Cousteau and National Geographic really came to life, besides on a 26-inch color TV. So another story that I had was that Churchill once said that the most exhilarating thing in the world is being shot at and missed. And I think a lot of that reflects the ocean too, in the sense that it's a mixture of exhilaration and fear. I remember one time I was sailing a boat from New York, and it was my first offshore nighttime sail. And I was just filled with trepidation about what might be under there, lurking danger, because the horizon, it was a moonless night, the horizon and the water were, pitch black, and it was just, it filled me with, with nervous energy. And at the same time, I was there seemingly alone, out on the water, under an incredible starry night. And I thought, this is what it's about. It's about exhilaration mixed with a bit of fear. But it's, it's kind of, those are the kind of stories that we're trying to tell at Nautilus. And I think we're doing a fairly decent job of it. So, thanks.
Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing some exhilarating examples of how storytelling and creativity can really inspire the public in what we're doing. And I think this is a great follow-on from what we've talked about already this morning with the data panel and how stories can really be this equalizer in our community. So I'd like to start with a kickoff question, and then we'll turn it over to our audience to see if anybody has questions. But I'd like to start here to my right with Naiʻa. How does creativity play into storytelling and your work, and why is it so important to bring creativity into ocean exploration?
Well, I think creativity, well, not for everybody, but you say that word and people do tend to connect it with art or having to be good at things that are in that artistic realm. And I think creativity is really a mindset. It is something that you can build upon through practice. And I think it's essential to ocean exploration from the standpoint of, again, you're headed places that are many times unknown, at least to you, potentially as that individual explorer. And I think the creativity allows you to create a diverse ways to approach that unknown and that journey, to have an open mind. I also think it helps you see, in each moment as you progress forward, it allows you, I think, to see both the seen and the unseen. And so many times without that creative mindset, it is kind of a black and white view or very binary versus, almost like what's behind, what's behind, it's the curiosity. And so, I think it also, when you engage with communities or other people that have had experiences in your path, that creative mindset, I do think helps you create that ability to translate, and get the most out of an experience. Yeah.
Adam, how do you use creativity in reaching younger audiences?
Well, I guess as you can see, we have talking animals exploring the ocean. And I think it goes back to that little girl at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They seem like aliens. And I think a lot of kids have no idea that these creatures actually exist. And what we found out early on was, while we have this kind of fanciful, funny, exciting adventure, people parents go, well, let's go online and see if, oh no, that creature, that siphonophore, that shark, whatever is real. And then they learn more about it. That's why it's so important that at the end of this song, we always go up to that screen and show an image of the real creature. And that hopefully leads into more learning and actual education about the ocean as opposed to just being entertained, which is also important.
I think the show does a great job of life imitating art, or art imitating life. And my son, when he's watching our live streams, he'll sing Creature Report or make connections to animals that have been presented in the Octonauts show. So I think you guys do a really great job with that. Jill, how about you with MATE? How do you bring creativity into operations and the students building technology?
Yeah, well, I appreciate, creativity. We go right to art. So thank you for acknowledging that there's other types of creativity, or else we all have stick figures. So I alluded to this a little bit during my talk. You know, it really, oh, okay. Now I have a working mic. Am I good? Okay, yes, I love thumbs up. I love the feedback from the audience. So as I alluded to in my talk, you know, we look at how do you translate this real world scenario, right? This hydrothermal vent, or it was mentioned earlier about the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance, which is one of our tasks this year. We partnered with the expedition. How do you translate that into something that's going to be staged at the bottom of a swimming pool so it can be accessible to everyone? Because we can't bring everybody out on a boat to the Weddell Sea and on this expedition. So how do you translate that, and how do you bring that into the bottom of the swimming pool and really engage people with it? Have them, you're inspiring them to use their own creativity, to not look at that piece of PVC pipe that's painted brown, but really look at those images of the Endurance and think, this is what I'm after, right? This is use your imagination and really think, again, not PVC pipe, brown PVC pipe on the bottom of the swimming pool, but it is the Endurance. And so just painting those scenarios in all of our documentation, and then translating them into something that's on the bottom of the swimming pool, and inspiring those students to think creatively and envision that it is the Weddell Sea and it is the shipwreck.
John, I would love to hear your thoughts, especially tying in this morning's panel with data and how we do visualization and storytelling with data and work that into bringing in broader audiences.
Well, we've been exploring this for quite a while. And it's because we've kind of come to this idea that, and we've been working with a lot of different organizations to collect data, put it out on platforms and everything else. And we keep saying to them, you know, if the data doesn't tell a story, nobody's going to care. And so what we've created these new special sections in Nautilus Oceans, one Ocean Decade with UNESCO, one on 30 by 30, one on Blue Economy. And we're also working to create a kind of a Ocean Data Common, which is really a place where we're going to tell we're going to let the data tell stories in narrative, in graphics, in maps, in images and everything else, because if we're going to change people's minds about the ocean, we think that, we have to drive political will. And the only way you drive political will is having a kind of a broad audience and a broad mass movement to do it. And we think the way to do that is through story, and especially stories that come out of the data.
Thank you. I have lots of questions because you guys are so inspirational, but I want to take a pause and see if there's anybody in the audience or online that may have a question for the panel.
Thank you, Carlie. We actually do have a question from a virtual attendee from Peter Gerges. Peter, if you want to go ahead and turn on your camera and mic, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, folks. It is so nice to see so many of my friends up there. So I have two questions. Well, one is really a comment. I really hope that you all as a panel are going to be taking a dance break, right? You got to keep up with the Octonauts. Number two, on a more serious note, film and television, the industry measures efficacy of their products in ways that I don't think we as the academic community do. Now, I don't know the pros and cons of how the film industry or television industry measures efficacy, but do you think that there are lessons that we as a community can learn from how the entertainment industry and the edutainment industry measures the impact and efficacy of your content. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. Great to see you on the big screen. Adam, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understood his question. So how do we make sure that entertainment is doing?
I think Pete was asking how the entertainment industry measures how effective the programming is. Are there lessons there that we can apply to ocean science community?
Yeah, I can't speak for the television industry. I can only speak for us, our show. You know, we were told that we couldn't teach. We were told we couldn't have 8 characters and that we couldn't call the ships, the submarines, gups or whatever, which are based on, which we like because they're like guppies. And we just went ahead and did it. And we found out fairly early on, even it started in London and in England, and we didn't even know how the show was doing because it started on the BBC. And we found out early on through mommy blogs and parents talking to each other, they were really excited that their kids were learning about sea creatures and they were going online and learning more about it. So that's how we measure our success. I mean, we felt like we were doing something right and we just kept doing it and it grew and it grew and it grew. And I don't know if that answers your question, but.
That's great. John, I'd be curious to hear, you know, from a print publication, you know, how do you measure besides distribution and what lessons there can we apply to the ocean science community?
Well, I mean, the standard is, you know, your subscription base and all those other metrics that are normal in publishing. But we've recently had a unique experience, which you are familiar with. We staged an ocean art exhibition at the Explorers Club with the collection from the Schmidt Artists at Sea program. And it was, I mean, for us, it was a tremendous success. I mean, we had 2,500 people who signed up to visit the show during its week-long presentation. And we had an opening night reception that, you know, we had UN delegates and supporters of Nautilus and people from Schmidt and the other partners of ours. And I mean, it was, you know, it was a great event and everything else, but we brought in a number of social media influencers to the event. And it went out on TikTok and Instagram and all that afterwards. And we had 75,000 views on TikTok and another 125,000 views on other social media. And the amazing thing about it was it drove a lot younger and more diverse audience to the show. And it was, you know, it was, I mean, it was remarkable. And we just, you know, we didn't know if it was going to work. We just kind of tried it and it worked. And it was a big success. And that's, you know, it's a new metric for us to work with.
And I think it also speaks to the creativity and collaborations and working with unseen partners or groups that, you know, you wouldn't think to work with. And I know we'll be talking about that in the future, but there was a ocean themed gin station as well, but, but you know, it was a different partner and a different way to engage. So,
yeah. And we're talking about, Carlie and I are talking to IMG Fashion about trying to bring the ocean further into popular culture, into fashion, because they work with a number of designers. They're the largest modeling agency in the world, and they own New York Fashion Week and Sydney Fashion Week. So we're trying to work with them to bring the ocean more into fashion.
yes, please.
I think what's really interesting, you know, in the arts, to expand that more to, like, you know, music, language, those kinds of things. You know, it's definitely been shown in schools, like having those kinds of programming, speaking multiple languages, being able to play an instrument, having, you know, art within your life. The learning that happens is you absorb so much more in all of your other classes. So I think it's in these creative modalities that, you know, it's not just the paper that you read, which I think kind of goes back to, is it like data and information or knowledge that you're absorbing into yourself and things becoming wisdom and a larger view of the world. And at least I know in the group murals that I've done, you know, very often it's the scientists who are like, do you really want me to color? Like, is that what we're doing? But by the end, they want to extend like another hour. They want to go, because it really opens up a different part of their brain and learning and building relationships with people.
I think it was a key theme this morning in the first panel when, there was a lot of discussion around wisdom. And one of the lessons I think from this panel is that there are different ways of distributing that wisdom. There's different ways of understanding that wisdom, and traditional science papers may not be the way that the majority of the world takes in the information we're gaining from the ocean. And so how do we use these creative models and endeavors to share wisdom in ways that people can digest and meets them in the places where they understand it? Jill, you look like you have something you
Yeah,
want to
I
add.
did. I appreciate the comment about TikTok. My 14-year-old has forbidden me to be on TikTok, even though we have a TikTok account. It certainly is a way to reach people. And I just wanted to say hi to Pete. It's good to see him. I'm sorry he's not here in person, but going through all those old photos, I have to tell Pete, I did find one of Katie Scott, a colleague that we share. And I think she still has the deepest diving and Ethel Merman impression in Alvin at one point during my time, but I didn't mean to digress in that. With efficacy, we're rooted, National Science Foundation founded the MAID Center. We're all about data evaluation, and we have years and years and years of survey data, post-competition survey data, talking to our students, parents, mentors, teachers, volunteers, and we've got great data to show that we're having an impact. And we do alumni surveys, and we've got great data about where our students have gone on working in marine industries and other technical sectors. But I think for us, the real showcase, the real efficacy is back to what we're all talking about, the storytelling, right? When we have our alumni who are out in the field, who may not be in an ocean related career, but still come back and volunteer their time at the competition, still email me when they see an ocean related story or some issue or the discovery. Oh my gosh, the discovery of the Endurance, my cell phone, I was getting texts and email messages from our community. The fact that they still engage with us, right? And they still come back, they still volunteer, they're still telling their own stories and inspiring that next group of individuals. And they're also informing what we do. We have a number of alumni who are out there, they work at General Motors. And when we ask them, what should we focus on in competition scenarios? What's out there? They said AI, they work in autonomous systems. And so they have fed that into our competition scenarios and helped us keep relevant, because we are an ROV competition. We're always going to have a tether, but helped us to stay relevant. So I guess it comes down to just those stories, right? The numbers, the data has to tell the story, right? So and we have all those wonderful numbers, but when you can hear it from the people that we impacted, when they've told their story and they come back and continue to tell it at our events and help to inspire and mentor the next group, I think that's really powerful.
I am afraid that we are running short on time. I think, you get a bunch of communications folks up here, we could talk for hours. But the good news is we're moving into lunch, and I encourage everybody to really seek out the panelists here because they are a wealth of knowledge and example. Before we wrap up though, maybe in 3 sentences or less, if each of you could maybe share what you envision differently or how the ocean exploration community can better engage the public from what they're already doing. John, let's start with you on the far end.
Oh, it's just, telling the stories of the wonders of the ocean is I think a way to, we all know it's under threat. We all know that that the climate is affecting it. But if we can tell the wonders of it, as the cliche goes, people protect what they love.
Absolutely. So, and I know we talked about this in our planning session. So ocean exploration to what end? Why, right? Why does someone in Kansas care about ocean exploration? Because perhaps data exploration discovery is going to lead to solutions and mitigation for climate change. It's going to help us feed our ever-growing population. It's going to perhaps find some compounds that can be turned into pharmaceuticals that can, cure cancer. I mean, to what end? And so I think it's important to know, what do we mean when we say, oh, great discoveries, new species, engaging the shipwreck, just fantastic. But what about the other pieces?
I really connect to what both of you said. I was talking to Jill during the break about the difficulty of simplifying data.
So, I think we probably read Nautilus magazine and read stuff that you guys do, and how do we turn this into a story? And, one example I can use that just occurred to me is the ocean is so vast. So the first thing we did is you said, well, let's just divide it up into these 3 zones, the sunlight zone, the twilight zone, and the midnight zone, where all these really cool creatures live. And that was a huge step for us right there, just reducing that data and giving it, giving it a kid-friendly package. And then from there, obviously, we find creatures that engage kids and that they care about, and then you're halfway there.
I think it's maybe helping people connect to like the approaches and our value systems and perspectives. It always doesn't have to look marine. So in the sense of, like my last mural, there, you could talk about moon cycles because that controls the ocean, even if you're not directly near the ocean, or if you were navigating like non-instrument navigation across the Pacific, if you were in the middle of like a desert, a sand desert looking up, you could also navigate by the stars. So there's a lot of approach that connects people to place. And so you can also connect, I think, to the ocean without things having to be like discretely water or ocean related. So I think that would be cool.
That's incredible, salient advice to end on. I'll turn it back over to Alan.
What an excellent panel. And at the risk of standing between you and lunch, I'll give you my 3 sentences. Understanding and appreciating the ocean means engaging with the ocean. Engagement can happen in many different modalities. But in all modalities, we should be striving to meet each other where we are and where they need to be. So as you continue out into the hallway and enjoy your lunch, break bread together, engage with one another in ways that are meaningful to you, but ideally in ways that are receptive and responsive to what might be meaningful to who you're engaging with.